You're listening to Crossroads France, an AFP podcast. I'm Barney Spender. Bienvenue. Our focus in this series of 5 podcasts is, as you may have guessed, on France, the hexagon at the heart of Europe. A key player on the world stage, this is a country where the sands of society are shifting on an almost daily basis. Things that used to define it appear to have gone. The welfare state is losing steam. Industry and agriculture are both suffering. The far right claims that the country isn't French enough and has become too multicultural, while even debating the place of Islam has become a dangerous no-go zone. In the lead-up to the 2022 presidential election, France is going through a crise d'identité. To start, we head to the Ardennes in the east of France, where there's a sense of abandonment.
Well, we're far from Paris, so we count for nothing. We're bordering Belgium, the ass end of the world.
Not the greatest introduction to the empty diagonal, an underpopulated band that stretches from the department of Landes in the southwest to Meuse in the northeast. Rural, out-of-the-way areas with small, overlooked towns. It was fertile territory for the Yellow Vests movement, the Gilets jaunes, when they first raised their voice in 2018. There is a sense of injustice in the empty diagonal, a feeling they've been cut adrift by the elite in the capital. The image of the French welfare state, held up as an example in other parts of the world, lies in tatters, with its reorganised public services leaving the locals feeling angry and ignored. Crossroads France, Episode 1, The Forgotten.
We're in Charleville-Mézières, in front of the theatre. We don't live far away, so we are locals.
Charleville-Mézières is perhaps best known as the birthplace of the 19th century poet Arthur Rimbaud. But his dream for winter is far removed from the reality of the cold on the evening when we visited. In front of the theatre, everyone is well wrapped up, including 48-year-old Angélique.
Yes, of course, it's winter, but we can get it much worse, much colder.
You live far from here?
45 minutes away.
So you had to think about coming tonight?
The weather forecast predicted snow, maybe ice. That's why I am worried about when I go home.
The man who prompted Angélique to get into her car was singer-songwriter Gauvin Cers.
Vous aimez beaucoup Gauvin?
Oh. His lyrics, he says what everyone is thinking.
Tout ce que pensent les gens en fait.
Devant le portail vert de son école primaire, on reconnaît tout de suite. Toujours la même dégaine avec son pull en laine, on sait qu'il est un style. Il pleure la fermeture à la rentrée future de ses 2 dernières classes.
We're being cut adrift every day by work or school closures, by college closures, by hospitals closing services.
On est les oubliés, la campagne est paumée, être loin de Paris, le cadet de leurs soucis. À vouloir recouper les campagnes.
So who are the oubliés, the forgotten that you sing about?
A lot of people, unfortunately, many people seem to identify themselves with the forgotten. I think people said to themselves, hey, I'm not the only one to think that. Someone's written a song about me. Maybe that's what touched them. You should ask people who are moved by the song, but, you know, the song affects me too.
The 32-year-old singer comes from La Creuse, another department in the empty diagonal, where the population is thinning out, just like the Ardennes.
All the young people are leaving. It's inevitable. There are no jobs.
What about those close to you?
Yes, nobody stays around. My son is 18. He's clear. He won't stay, no matter what. He says, why stay? To be unemployed?
Gauvin Cers comes from a village of about 1,000, but like many others, he also left to give his music career a chance. He fills the biggest theatres in France, but likes to play in small towns as a form of commitment.
I experienced it when I was little. We would drive 80 kilometers with my father to go and see a concert. I was lucky to have a father who was passionate about music. But that's not the case for everyone. Suddenly, here we are. For sure, it's a part of my story, and I want to return the favor. That's why music is important too. I think it's very important to give people hope.
Les Oubliés may not be well known in the Élysée Palace, but 300 kilometers away from Paris, in a packed hall in the Ardennes, everyone knows the chorus of Gauvin's song by heart. Children are just numbers, he sings. The resonance of a lost generation hit a nerve in late 2018 when it became an anthem on the Yellow Vest marches. In spite of her weather worries, Angélique did get home safely from the concert. We met up with her the next day at home in Fumay, 40 kilometers away.
I had a blast last night. He says we are the forgotten ones, the countryside, the lost ones, the ones too far from Paris. The whole of Ardennes feels that. The whole valley, Fumay, Vireux, that's where I am from, 13 kilometers away.
These days, Angélique is a nursing assistant at the local hospital in Fumay.
J'ai travaillé, j'ai eu mon premier boulot à l'hôpital et puis j'y suis restée.
I had my first job at the hospital and I stayed there. I qualified as a nursing assistant and put nursing school on hold. As I was hired at the hospital, I remained a nursing assistant. And then, well, I was ill, and afterwards I was told, professional reclassification. So I was a bit involved in physical therapy, cleaning. I was all over the place. Now I'm on reception.
By working within the health system, Angélique has seen at first hand the vicious circle for areas where the population is dwindling. People leave, budgets for public services are reduced, and people want to leave even more.
When I started, it wasn't like this. It's getting worse. When they reduce the beds, then they cut the staff as well. It's getting more difficult.
The situation is further complicated by the lack of doctors in France, something that hit home during the 2 years of pandemic. Elodie Bertrand was also at the Gauvin Cerce concert. She comes from a village a little further west in the Ardennes.
The problems we face out here in the country, we don't talk about them. I mean, it's the lack of doctors. To have an appointment with a specialist, we have to wait 6 or 7 months because we don't have the right establishment near us. If I want to see a specialist, I have to travel 90 kilometers and I have an appointment in 6 months' time. It's not right. We pay our taxes like everyone else. We should be entitled to services like everyone else.
When Elodie talks about the distances she needs to travel, she isn't joking. The price of fuel has been on the rise for the last 3 years and is hovering around €2 a litre. So if the hospital is far, it costs more to get there. Access, though, is the big issue. According to Eurostat, France has fewer doctors than the European average, 3.2 per 1,000 population, compared with 3.9 across the EU. In Angélique's town of Fumay, which has 3,300 inhabitants, there are just 2 GPs, both close to retirement. It's a serious concern for local Mayor Mathieu Sonnet.
There are fewer and fewer services in our towns, and people feel more and more abandoned.
And it's not just health. The tax office has also left town, stoking fears there'll be further closures.
We had the Yellow Vests a few years ago. I don't think anyone listened to them. It might happen again. The price of petrol has increased even more. And if we continue to view our public services basically as profit centers, then I think we will see them going to the wall.
All the same, public services are good for those who have nothing, since they belong to everyone.
So says Michel Leflon, president of the National Coordination of the Defence Committees for Local Hospitals and Maternity Wards. She was also an anesthesiologist at Charleville Hospital, so understands the local concerns.
Obviously, with regard to the hospital, it is even more complicated for people who have no money. These people can't get treatment. I'm not sure of the exact figures, but across the department, something like 50% of the people don't pay income tax. They're below the taxable threshold.
The figures bear her out. According to the National Statistics Service, 1 in 2 households in the Ardennes doesn't earn enough to pay tax, well above the national average.
That shows it's not just the fringes of society.
The COVID pandemic temporarily halted cutbacks, particularly in the health sector. But the question of civil service reforms has been raised on the presidential campaign. Some candidates want to eliminate or redistribute tens of thousands of positions. Others want to create new ones. But they all agree on one point. Access to healthcare must be a priority. What does your sign say?
Exhausted caregiver. Give us back the nurses. Better working conditions. Take care of us, and we'll take care of the patients.
The government has pledged to increase the salaries of healthcare workers, but several collectives and unions believe that's just election talk. Michel Leflon, who we heard from just a moment ago, isn't overly optimistic.
Even the biggest hospitals are understaffed, and now we're in a vicious circle as the staff can't take it anymore, because there aren't enough of them, and also because what we ask them to do is to be profitable, and that isn't what their job is about. They leave, and we're in this spiral, because when someone leaves, because they can't take it anymore, their colleagues have even more work, which in turn makes them even keener to leave.
Les autres ont encore plus de boulot, donc ils ont encore plus envie de partir. Il y a des médecins qui partent vers le privé parce que les conditions de travail.
There are doctors who leave for the private sector because the working conditions are better. They're looked after better. It seems silly, but that's the way it is. They're better paid and usually have fewer night shifts.
En général, ils ont moins d'astreintes de nuit.
So according to Michel Leflon, doctors are leaving public hospitals because of the working conditions. Thomas Talek, overall director of the Ardennes hospitals, says it's deeper than that.
Yes, it's even more radical. That's to say that the doctors choose to go to centres that don't provide permanent care, and so they have a day job and that's it. That can certainly be intense, but they're not on call, or at least only in exceptional circumstances, at night and on weekends. The public hospital remains the only health structure in France which is open 24/7 all year round. This isn't the case with other structures. They offer something else.
C'est pas le cas des autres structures. Les autres structures proposent autre chose.
To encourage health professionals to settle in the Ardennes, Thomas Talek is working with local elected officials such as Charleville-Mézières centre-right mayor Boris Ravignon, who wants to see more state involvement.
We are fighting like crazy. We recruited an ophthalmologist for the centre of Charleville. In one morning, I think he made 5,400 appointments. It was so astonishing that it was in the newspaper and the radio talked about it. It gave everybody a good laugh. But when it comes to health, we have been abandoned. We have fewer doctors than elsewhere, so more problems. We have projects, but we don't get help with our projects. That's being abandoned. I like the expression, heaven helps those who help themselves. We start by helping each other, but we can't do everything. Otherwise, it means that there is no national health policy.
Besides the health crisis, rural regions, particularly those in the empty diagonal, are being hit in other service areas. Village schools have been closed down. Post offices have disappeared as the state cuts back and moves more and more services online. These closures have in turn prompted a series of demonstrations, which show the deep attachment the French have for their public services. Sociologist Igal Fijalkov, who's co-authored a study on the subject, explains why.
This attachment to local public services is also an attachment to the local space, to the local identity. Basically, the inhabitants of these territories, when they show an attachment or defend their service, what they are also defending is something that relates to the history of the place, the identity of the place.
Tu t'appelles comment? Elliot. C'est Elliot, s'il vous plaît.
So when they defend their services, they are ultimately defending their community.
La communauté à laquelle on appartient. C'est mes souvenirs.
These are my memories from school. It's the story of my parents, of my experiences at the station, of my travels. It's my attachment to what ultimately constitutes a local public well-being. It is too simplistic to say that all we are defending is a service rendered. It is not just that. It is also something else, something much more symbolic.
With the electorate in France arrowing in on the big picture of the presidential plan, it's up to the local officials to kick against the trend. And Mathieu Sonnet, the mayor of Fumay, hasn't given up yet.
Moi, je pense que si on est élu, on se doit d'être optimiste.
If we are elected, we must be optimistic. Otherwise, there's no point in running. We have everything to get there. 30, 40 years ago, we had full employment. We had a valley which produced a lot. Take Electrolux After Martin. Practically all the washing machines in Europe were produced there. And we have now lost this knowledge because our national policy meant we didn't invest in industry. Now we have to go down other routes. We're not giving up. I think our best cards may lie in the climate and sustainable development, because we have space, we have wasteland, and that can bring back jobs. And that can reboot the region. That's what I believe.
J'y crois. Voilà.
It's not only in the Ardennes that people believe in a renaissance of French industry. Right across France, initiatives are emerging to bring prosperity back to areas that have crumbled in the 21st century. This will be the subject of the next episode, for which we cross France to head down south. You've just been listening to the first episode of Crossroads France, a podcast from Agence France Presse, which is also available in French under the title Turbulence. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to share it and tell people about it. This podcast was originally created by Sarah Lou Lepers. My name is Barney Spender. À bientôt.